Hello and welcome to the Gemhawks YouTube channel. I hope you're having a beautiful day today no matter what it is you're doing. For the free wire tutorial today, I'd like to share another quick to make bead stash project. This is the One Love earring. Now there's a lot of wibbly wobbly movement in those and it's a great way to use up relatively small amounts of beads. They again make up quite quickly. So let's head down to the board and we'll take a look at a couple of the colour combinations I've created for you. So here's a couple of samples for you. These are from Jessie James Beads. They are Sarah's Wedding Mixes in Aspen and in Written in the Stars. Now I don't receive any remuneration for sharing those names with you. I just love the beads. So there you have it. That's what we're going to work with today. We're actually going to be using the Aspen mix, which is this gorgeous golden tone. So let's just pop that little baby up into the corner and take a closer look. Now there are two pieces of wire involved in this project and it will make up very, very quickly. And as you can see, you don't need a huge amount of beads. So there's a smaller amount of beads in the green one than there are in the golden toned one, and you can use up your bead stash to make a project like this. I like them because there's loads of movement. The beads can spin freely on the hoop section, and then the little heart drop down at the bottom can move as well. So let's just pop that up to the corner for a second. They are gorgeous, gorgeous bead mixes. I've just popped them into some pots that I had available. If you fancy some of those, head over to Jessie James Beads. These are my own pots. Let's pop that up to the top there. So let's make that little heart drop first of all. Now I'm working with 1mm 18 gauge wire. And this is around about 5 inches. You'll need 2 of those to make your matching heart drop shapes. So let's give that a quick warm through. Now, as I've expressed to you before, when you're working with earrings, it pays to have the 2 sections of wire side by side and to do each small step at the same time. So I'll bend one wire, then I'll bend the second. So let's get that crossed up. That's around about halfway. You could use a ruler to make your life that little bit more accurate. Now, I actually quite like to have a sharp bend down at the base of the heart. So what I'm going to do is just open that angle back out, use my plier tips to get right in to the very, very angle itself, and just sharpen that up slightly and then bring it back a little bit closer. Now you can use round nose pliers, you can use bail making pliers. I'm going to use my memory wire pliers, which I do very thoroughly recommend. So I'm going to use the larger side of my memory wire pliers and I'm just going to pop that wheel or that spoke about halfway along that section of wire to begin with, and I'm going to turn that around a couple of times until I get the size of heart I'm after. Now if you're making pairs of earrings, you'll want to ensure that that's the same length. So that's just a little bit too short, so if that happens you can just rotate back and get that to be the right size. So let's just offer that up again. So those two will now match quite nicely. So I'm going to pop those pliers back in on the large side and take the tail of wire all the way over the top and just sit it in position. Now I do want those to be quite close. So it's like 1.5 times around it goes. And then I'm going to grab any fine tipped pliers, so I'm going to use my chain nose pliers, my bent tip chain nose pliers, and just bring that wire up at the very, very top of that circular form that makes the lobe of the heart. I do want it to come up in a straight line. If I put the heart down on, you'll see that the wire I want to come up is a straight line in line with that centre. So if we turn the piece over, what I'm going to do is to ensure that those spirals occur in the same direction. So this one is starting on the front here, spiralling around on the back there. So I just need to make sure that the wire passes over the front instead of behind like the first one did. And just chase that wire all the way around. And once I get that to the correct size, I'll show you exactly what I mean. Now, hearts are one of those designs that you can create asymmetrically. You can make them really nice and big and chubby. You can make them tall and skinny. It's totally within your control to decide how you want that to happen. I'm going to push this just slightly closer together and then pop that plier back in. Take the wire over the top so that it goes all the way around 1.5 times, and then I can pop my bent chain nose pliers back in and draw the wire upright again. So those two are now basically matching. I've got the spiralling on one side and it's looking the same on both sides on the front. So what I'm going to do is to bring both of these little sticky uppy bits forwards. Push that. It's now going away from you, but it's forwards because that's the side I want to show on my earring later. So just make sure that those are coming away at around about 45 degrees. I'm then going to use my memory wire pliers again to create a small, simple loop. There's a couple of ways you can do this. You can estimate how much wire you think you'll need, or you can create the loop and trim off the excess. So if you're newer to working with wire, I would say let's create an elongated loop. Twist that all the way around, pull the tail through, sit that loop down. Now if I just hold this up sideways, you'll see that I've created that loop just at the top of that spiral and a half that we're using as the top of the heart. And what we're going to do is to make sure that that sits properly before we trim away the excess. Now with any project working in wire, we always look twice and then cut once. My nan was clever with sewing. When I was younger, she used to make all sorts of things, and she used to say the tailor's mantra, which is measure twice, cut once. So I'm going to be very, very careful to make sure that I am cutting the correct part. If I just put my thumb underneath, you'll see that that loop isn't quite perfect. We can fix that really easily with our flat pliers. In this case, my bent chain nose pliers. They're flat surfaces that come together. And that now sits exactly how I want it to. So if I just flick that in the light, you'll see I've made a simple loop and it sits up at the top of the heart, going in an almost upright fashion. So I need to do the same on the second side. I'll make this one a little bit quicker. So pop your whatever round form it is you're using into position, rotate that all the way around. Getting those two loops lining up is really key to having the heart sit neatly when we add it to the hoop shape. So again, look twice, make sure you're over the correct part before you trim that wire away, and then you can just form that loop correctly, get it to sit, and then give it a quick strengthen. Now I'm going to open and close my pliers over those simple loops several times because I want them to have strength, but I also want this design to be nice and light to be worn in the ear. So a couple of little squashes and that looks pretty decent to me. And I just need to make sure, because I'm making a pair of earrings, that those are the same size, that the gap between the loops up at the top is exactly the same, and that both of those simple loops up at the top are sitting nice and straight and upright. So as you can see from my samples, you can vary the size, you can vary the number of beads you're using, and you can also see that there's quite a lot of lovely movement in these designs. Great way to use up the last few beads from a mix and to make instant gifts. Or if you're selling at fairs this festive season, then these don't cost very much to make. So let's move on to the creation of the hoop and putting it all together in the next section of the video. So we're going to make the hoop section and thread everything together in this next segment of the tutorial, and I have now around about a 7-inch length. You'll need 2 to make a pair of earrings, and that again is 1mm or 18 gauge medium round copper wire. So the first thing that you're going to need to do is to smooth and warm your wire through to get it to be lovely and flexible. You will need beads with good apertures through them. When you start adding beads to curved wire, because of the nature of geometry, and that again is something that's completely beyond me, not a mathematician, but because of the size of your bead apertures, they will just need to be that little bit larger than 1mm in order to scooch neatly all the way around the circular form we're about to make. So that's nice and warm through, and I've got nice flush cut ends on either end. I'm going to grab a round form and I'm going to make a loop at one end, crossing over with just a tiny bit, about 1/2 inch extra on one side. So we will again need to check that we're making the same size loops before we put an upright bend just on the long side of that loop. It should ideally be straight up, not up at a funny angle like mine just is. There we go. So we've got just a little tail going past that point, and we'll be utilising that in just a moment. The next thing we're going to do is to start threading everything together. So let's have a look at the bead order. and we're going to thread them on to the short end. I've got my earring finding at the ready. We're going to start with one of these lovely glossy golden beads and then a golden toned daisy spacer. You can use whichever bead mix you love. Let's get the next bead on. The next thing we're going to do is to add the first side of our heart drop section and then a bead to sit in the centre. So we're adding this bead in, so you could make that a different colour, do whatever you want, it's your project. And then we're going to thread that bead on, bring the heart drop all the way back up and pop that second loop into position, draw that all the way down and then continue with our chosen bead order. Now you don't have to have one up on the neck of the design if you don't want, but I really like the extra added little bit of luster that it brings. So let's grab that last golden toned bead, pop that baby back up out of the way for the moment. Now I am going to employ those very useful memory wire pliers again. And what I'm going to do is use the smaller side to create a little U shape. So I'm quite close to the end of that wire. You can see if I just tilt that in the light. And what I'm going to do is to create a hook to go around the neck of the design. So you can see that little hook shape there. I'm just going to loop that over the upright in the centre. And you can see that my chosen beads work really well on this curved wire. If you're working with 1mm 18 gauge wire, you will find some beads, certainly gemstone beads, tend to have quite a narrow squeak and they might not like the curvature on your hoop. There are two things you can do. You can either choose a different bead with a larger, smoother aperture, or you can make the circle much larger, and that will reduce the issue caused by a curve moving through that bead drill aperture. So once everything is in place, we're just going to close that little hook up. Let's get some light underneath it. That's better. I'm just going to very simply give that a gentle little squish just to close it up, trying to get that at the best camera angle to show you. And there you go. And then once that's closed up, what I'm going to do is very softly just pull that hook back so that it centralises, and I'll bring my loop back upright. So that's the main part of your process done. And if you didn't want to add another bead up at the top, you could just pop yourself either a simple or a wrapped loop up at the top. But what we're going to do, take a quick check to make sure that those hoops are the same size. I think that's pretty much close enough. They should be on opposite sides of the head, so a tiny variance isn't the end of your world. Let's add that last bead into position, and I've gone for one of these absolutely gorgeous dice, faceted, world's beautiful dice. I don't know what you'd call it. A cube? That would probably be quite smart. So you can go for a simple loop or a wrapped loop. I'm going to go for a wrapped loop. Let's pop the pliers sideways and bring the wire out to one side. And the reason I use the pliers to help me do that is, for number one, I'm protecting my bead. Number two, I'm creating a little gap up at the top there, into which I can put a couple of wraps on the top of that wrapped loop. Now I only need quite a small loop up at the top. So again, I'm going to employ those very useful memory wire pliers, rotate those around, being careful that I'm not putting any stress on any of my beads. So let's show you. There's the first half of that shepherd's crook design. Draw the wire all the way over the top and sit that down. So let's just make sure that that loop sits centrally on the top of that little neck of wire that we've created. Make sure it's the same size loop as we have on the first pair, or the first half of the pair, and then we're going to draw that wire around. Now if your wire is starting to get a little bit tough, you might just like to warm that gently through with your thumb and forefinger. I think I may have done too many wraps of the wire, in which case my earrings won't match, but what I will simply do is recreate that if that is a problem. What we do need to do is make sure that we get that nasty sticky uppy bit nice and flat and flush before we can pop these down and have our pair of earrings. Let us just open up the chosen earring finding, slide that into position, and then we've got our second half of the pair of earrings. So you can see I've got a single wrap of wire on the first earring and two wraps of wire on the second earring. So that doesn't cut it for me. I will simply remake them with a slightly shorter distance on the gap between the top of the bead and where that loop is created. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today here on YouTube. I hope you have loved the One Love earrings as much as I have. I'll pop details in the video description of where you can find those beautiful mixes. Aspen was the gold and Written in the Stars was the beautiful green mix, both from Jessie James Beads, Sarah's wedding collection. Have yourself a beautiful, beautiful day. And if you have any requests at all, please don't be afraid to drop them down in the comments. Any subscriptions, likes and comments do always help the visibility of the channel. You take care and I'll see you again very, very soon. Bye for now.